Okay, well, we thought we'd give you an idea of the kind of things that happened during the pilot back in 2013, 2014. The Historic Towns Initiative was set up in June of 2012. As Martin said, it was Minister Deanhan's first question when he came in was what was happening about towns. So we had a look at it, thinking to take a more holistic view of the whole approach to regeneration. We were very aware that there had been a lot of development since the Heritage Towns brand, and that really there was a lot more to regeneration historic towns than just a simple branding programme. So it was a joint undertaking between our department, Fáilte Ireland and the Heritage Council. We set up a steering committee. We invited 3 towns to act as pilots for this programme, and together we drew up a framework for the pilot, which was launched in February 2013. Martin has spoken to you about heritage-led regeneration and the principles behind it, and really we feel this is at the absolute heart of sustainable development, using the existing fabric that we already have, the existing towns and settlements, and providing a distinct sense of place, that the heritage is what sets each town apart, it makes it distinctive, and that they should be capitalising on that to regenerate, rather than every town kind of trying to look like every other town, and that this is what will attract both tourists and visitors, but also potential investors, and gives a sense of identity to the community, not just the people living in the town, but the people who look in the hinterland, who look to the town as the cultural centre and cultural and civic focus of their regions. We did look at a lot of the heritage-led regeneration approaches that had been taken around Europe. HERO, the Heritage as Opportunity, and Inherit were 2 very interesting projects that had been done and had published their results. They were looking at cities or city quarters. We had to tailor it to really look at Irish towns with quite small populations in comparison to the kind of projects that these were looking at, but a lot of the principles were the same. Closer to home, we looked at the kind of Irish initiatives that were going on. At the time, the Heritage Council was dealing with the Village Design Statement toolkits. Fáilte Ireland themselves had produced a document on the historic towns. The Irish Walled Towns Network, which I know a lot of you are also part of, was also doing some interesting work, getting communities together, drawing up conservation plans centred around their historic settlements. It's worth talking a little bit about the Heritage Towns branding, because it has persisted. It was set up in 1994 by what was then Bord Fáilte as a way of branding a number of towns, and there were originally 34 towns in the network. They concentrated a lot on, cleaning up the centre of towns, a lot of we would kind of think maybe more superficial things of making the towns look better, signage and the like. But it was primarily a branding exercise. There are still 15 towns that market themselves and are together as a Heritage Towns network. They have a website, but effectively it is a promotional tool rather than a regeneration tool. The framework I mentioned that we drew up, based on the heritage-led regeneration processes we had seen around the world, led us to publish a 6-step process, really understanding the town and its heritage as a first step. Like, what do you have? What are the assets? What kind of condition they're in? What kind of threats is the town under? What kind of opportunities are there? Assembling support. We think it was best led by the local authorities. They're there to give the administrative support, to give the backup to the townspeople. And then addressing the issues, taking a hard, cold look at what are the problems, what are the opportunities, what are the threats, and not try and gloss over problem areas. And then getting together a vision that everyone shares, the townspeople, the local authority, where are they going, what kind of vision do they have for the town, and setting themselves goals, and then implementing those. And then constantly reviewing and monitoring. Is it going well? Was it a mistake? Are we achieving success? So that was the framework that we ran the pilot on. The pilot ran from February 2013. It was originally meant to be a year-long pilot, but we decided, because of the changes that were coming to local administration through the Local Government Reform Act in 2014 in June, we decided to make an 18-month programme out of it to cover those changes and make sure there was buy-in from the new municipal districts and other kind of structures that were in place. So the department over that 18-month period provided €360,000, which was originally divided equally among the towns. There was some then reallocation towards the end, as some towns didn't manage to spend all their money and others were waiting to take it. Fáilte Ireland provided €90,000 for non-capital tourism-related projects. And of that, some was put aside for surveys of the attitudes of the residents and the visitors and the businesses towards their heritage. We published a circular to guide the planning authorities. I'll talk a little bit about that later, about what kind of works would or would not be funded. Each town drew up a programme of proposals that were then put to the National Steering Committee. There was some discussion as to which would or wouldn't, some changes made and the like, and then approval given. And the Fáilte Ireland money went towards interpretive and animation projects, and the department's money went towards capital works. So the baseline surveys were actually carried out by behaviour and attitudes based on questionnaires that were drawn up by ourselves in the department and Fáilte Ireland to question visitors, residents and businesses. The visitors were stopped on the street and interviewed face to face. Residents were phoned in their homes, and the business study was done a bit later, and it was again done by phoning around. So people were asked questions about access and transport, about the amenities and services in the towns, about exploring the town by foot, and about how people felt about the history and culture of the towns. As I said, they were carried out. The visitors were interviewed during the summer, and so were the residents, and then later in the autumn the businesses were interviewed. And the idea was that we would have some baseline material that we could test against at a later stage to see where the work successful, had the project work, and what was successful or not about it. What was interesting was we felt we were pushing an open door, that there was a huge enthusiasm for the heritage of the towns and the history of the towns, both as providing interesting places to live and to visit, but also the businesses found it a very important part of their attracting people to the town. They looked at the strengths and weaknesses of the towns, things like in Westport, the amenities and the services, the qualities of the restaurants, the presentation of the squares were all seen as very great positives and strengths. Youghal and Listowel, the visual presentation of their monuments and buildings was seen as very important strength. To look at some of the ideas of the challenges the towns had and things they could work on. I think in Westport, one of the things was management of traffic in the town centre and overhead wires, which I think was very frustrating because they had undergrounded an awful lot of their wires. There was just one particular place where there were still a lot of overhead cables. Youghal, people criticised the range of shopping facilities and the presentation of the shops. And Listowel, they were talking again about the shopping facilities that were available and also felt they needed to raise the awareness of history and heritage. So there were pointers of good and bad that came out of those surveys. If you look at the capital projects that were administered by the towns, they advertised in many cases for suitable projects, and the towns themselves then did the assessment of the applications and administered the payments. But the towns could also use the HDI fund to support its own projects, so they could do public realm works where these were approved by the committee. And there was a lot of matching funding brought in, both from the local authorities themselves and also from private owners in the towns, which brought the total investment in the three towns to just short of €1 million. The kind of things we said would qualify were things like building repair works, bringing vacant space back into use. Now, unfortunately, none of that happened, which was a pity. Probably in the timescale involved, it wasn't possible. We looked at, we'd fund reinstatement of architectural features, street enhancement works, public realm works, and archaeological works. Things that we said we wouldn't were works that had commenced, obviously, previously, construction of new buildings or demolition of protected structures. So the kind of things we learned from the pilot, we found there was this very high appreciation of the heritage in the towns and the benefits it could bring to regenerating the towns. We found that the towns that had a very clear vision for their town, supported by an action plan, really were able to use the funding to the best advantage, and the three pilot towns were all at different stages of development of plans. So it was a very interesting contrast. We learned a lot from that. We learned that the local authorities really need to take a very strong leadership role. They provide the continuity over time, they can provide the administrative backup and the like, but that the participation of the townspeople in making decisions was absolutely critical to the success and in buying into that vision. Just going to quickly go through the type of projects that were funded just so that you get an idea of the kind of range of things. In Westport, they identified that they had a very distinctive kind of window, a three-part up and down sliding sash window, which are called Wyatt windows, which they decided to use to particularly fund. They thought it a distinctive element of the town. Siobhan is going to show you the Bridge House here, completed photographs. This was a very prominent building which was in very grave danger of structural collapse at the time, and we did put money into that and into reporting on it and what needed to be done. A facade painting scheme, public realm works. I'll show you a photograph later of as a setting for a new sculpture. Quite a bit of a few projects were centred around Westport House, because Westport House really was the reason why Westport Town existed. It was a planned town. Money was put into restoring the gates of the walled garden. There was a whole Westport House study day, which was run in conjunction with the Irish Georgian Society, and it was repeated again last year as well. It was so successful. There was animation, interactive interpretation project as well. Creation of a linear orchard, which was planting fruit and nut trees along an old railway line, a disused railway line. Conservation works to the local heritage museum, shopfront conservation, and again then specific ones to specific buildings, a structural assessment of an old railway shed, murals in Holy Trinity Church, and then the Chinese wallpaper project in Westport House. This is the public realm works that we funded. Westport had commissioned this sculpture, the Sentinel, to commemorate the fact that they'd been voted the best place in Ireland to live by the Irish Times. And it was to be, I'm not sure if this works, a small space left at the end of a terrace where the end of the terrace had been demolished. And actually they turned it into a very beautiful little, almost like a little pocket park. This is the linear orchard and all the people participating. Thanks to Simon Wall for providing this montage of where the people planting all these fruit and nut trees. Again, the Chinese wallpaper, extremely important example of this kind of wallpaper, and it was in very bad condition and it was restored. And then the Westport story, this was the walking tour, the animation tour with costumes and interpretation and scripts that was funded by Culture Ireland. Youghal, again, were completing public realm works. They had erected these enormous umbrellas to form a marketplace called the Tulips. They also funded a historic core painting scheme of facades, advertising their app that they had developed for walking tours of the town. They put a lot of money into things like branding, the Raleigh Quarter, St Mary's Collegiate Church Trail, and a maritime history trail. They also did a lot of works in St Mary's, the medieval collegiate church, and filmed the kind of archaeological works and mounted an exhibition of what the findings there. They also finished their sea wall to protect this new open marketplace from sea rise levels that they're worried about around the sea there. New footpaths around the courthouse and repairs to the courthouse itself, and then a lot of other public realm works around the town at various locations. And as you can see, very successfully completed. And among the facade painting schemes, they included the very early 1703 Red House, very prominent building. These are the tulips that form a covered market area, but can also be taken down when not in use and to make a car park, provide a car park. Listowel also, and you'll see the trend here, the facade painting scheme. This was something that was discussed quite a bit in the steering group. It was seen as being, a quick win. The people on the ground could see improvements, when facades of main streets or semi-derelict areas of the town were painted up. It gave a lot of confidence that things were happening. Listowel also funded a reinstatement of architectural features and a building a facade repair scheme around the town. A vacant shops project. They did quite a bit of signage around Listowel Castle itself and the monorail in Lartigue. They trained guides. They upgraded their heritage trail in the town. They did some conservation works on a tower in a graveyard just at the periphery of the town. The Shanachie Centre, which is all the centre of Writers' Week, they funded some signage and display units there. Youghal, the ring fort that gives the town its name, they erected storyboards there and carried out an archaeological programme for schools. They also did a lot of conservation of the Celtic Revival stucco work that Pat McAuliffe did, which is such a distinctive feature of the town. And then they commenced on a conservation plan because they were, of the three towns, they were the only ones that didn't have a dedicated conservation-led plan for the town at the time, but now do. That's just an example of some of the kind of conservation and painting works they did. The Lartigue monorail, which is quite a distinctive feature of the town, and then their heritage trail leaflet. And then last year they published their heritage-led regeneration strategy. So that'll give you a flavour of the kind of works that were done during the pilot and how successful a lot of them have been. Hopefully you'll hear from the next speakers. So thank you very much.